Paris, 1793. The air is thick and sticky, with a scent of fear, sweat, and cheap wine. A crowd has gathered in the Place de la Révolution, thirsting for justice and blood. Today, their thirst will be quenched by the head of 25-year-old Charlotte Corday, the murderer of the fiery revolutionary Jean-Paul Marat. The guillotine's blade, the national razor, gleams in the sun and falls with a terrifying whistle. The deed is done. But what happens next will forever remain in the annals of history's most terrifying legends. The executioner's assistant, a certain François Legros, grabs the severed head by the hair, holds it up to show the crowd, and, with a grin, delivers a resounding slap. And then the unthinkable happens. In front of thousands of Parisians, Charlotte's dead eyes widen, and her cheek, according to eyewitnesses, turns crimson with anger and indignation. This chilling tale was passed from mouth to mouth, growing in detail and raising the most fundamental, the most terrifying question a person can ask about the nature of life and death. What if consciousness doesn't die instantly? What if our mind, our I, remains trapped in a severed head for a few seconds, maybe longer, realizing the full horror of its situation? Is this simply a post-mortem muscle spasm, as skeptics claimed? Or have we, without knowing it, peered behind the curtain separating existence from non-existence, and seen there not a void, but the last desperate glimmer of a fading thought? This terrifying incident was far from isolated. History is replete with similar testimonies, balancing on the edge of myth and documented fact. The great chemist Antoine Lavoisier, sentenced to death by the same guillotine, allegedly made a deal with his assistant to blink as long as he could after his execution, to prove that thought lives on after death. Legend has it that his eyes continued to blink for another 15, and according to some sources, as long as 30 seconds. Modern science, of course, finds a more prosaic explanation. The brain, deprived of oxygen and blood flow, doesn't actually die instantly. It retains a residual biochemical potential, which can last for several seconds of chaotic neural activity. This is the brain's death throes, the death throes of synapses, that can cause facial muscle contractions, eye movements, or mouth movements. But try telling that to someone looking into the eyes of a severed head. To human perception, those few seconds become an eternity. What can flash through the mind during this time? An entire life? The realization of the end? Or simply a deafening, all-consuming horror that cannot be expressed? The question of the last thought of the decapitated has ceased to be simply a topic for fireside stories. It has become a scientific problem, a challenge to the boldest and perhaps most insane minds of humanity. It is here, on this fine line between proven fact and mystical horror, that an even bolder and more terrifying idea is born. If the brain can function for several seconds after separation from the body, then what prevents us from prolonging these seconds? What if we can trick nature, replacing the heart and lungs with a complex mechanism of tubes and pumps that will nourish the brain with blood, oxygen, and life? Is it possible to make dead eyes see again and dead ears hear? Is it possible to create something unimaginable? A living head without a body? A head that exists, thinks, feels, but has neither arms to act nor legs to escape? This question takes us from the misty legends of the past and plunges us into the cold light of 20th century scientific laboratories, where the nightmares of science fiction writers began to take on flesh and blood. Forget fleeting grimaces on the scaffold. Ahead of us lie real, documented experiments that will make you question the very nature of life. After all, it's one thing to speculate about the last seconds of consciousness, and quite another to see with your own eyes a living head, separated from the body, looking back at you, and perhaps understanding something. Legends of the last sparks of consciousness in a severed head, wafting from the bloody fog of the French Revolution, have haunted minds for centuries. They remained mere eerie tales, whispers in the dark, until one day, in a completely different era and a new country, these fantasies collided with chilling reality. We are transported from Paris in the late 18th century to Moscow in the 1920s. Here, within the scientific institutes of the young Soviet Republic, obsessed with the idea of building a new world and a new man, worked a scientist whose name is almost forgotten today, but whose experiments would make even Dr. Frankenstein shudder. His name was Sergei Sergeyevich Bryukhonenko. He was a man who decided to defy death itself, armed not with mystical incantations, but with a scalpel, pumps, and cold scientific calculation. He asked the question previously considered the province of madman: can the brain be made to live when the body that served as its home is already dead? And in search of an answer, he crossed the line from which it was thought there was no return. The centerpiece of his incredible experiments was a device that looked like a child of the industrial age, bulky, noisy, assembled from tubes, flasks, and motors. Bryukhonenko called it the autojector. Essentially, it was the world's first primitive yet ingenious artificial blood circulation device, a mechanical heart and lungs all in one. This apparatus was supposed to do what the most complex living organism had done over millions of years of evolution: saturate the blood with oxygen and pump it under pressure into the vessels feeding the brain. The idea was both simple and monstrous. If the brain receives oxygen and nutrients, will it continue to function even if its host, the body, is irretrievably lost? In 1928, Bryukhonenko and his team demonstrated the result of their work to a stunned audience of scientists. On the lab bench, connected by tubes to the humming autojector, lay a dog's head, separated from its body. And it was alive. What the cameras and witnesses captured that day blurs the line between scientific breakthrough and nightmare. These were no longer ambiguous stories about a grimace on the face of the executed man. This was a documented fact. The dog's head, separate from its body, responded to external stimuli. When a bright beam of light was shone into its eyes, its pupils constricted and its eyelids blinked. When a loud hammer banged near its ear twitched, and its entire head showed signs of restlessness. Most shockingly, the head responded to chemical stimuli. Its nose wrinkled at the smell of acid, and its tongue lolled out and licked its lips when a swab soaked in lemon juice was brought to them. The climax of this horrific spectacle came when a piece of cheese was placed in the dog's head's mouth. It swallowed, and the cheese, unable to find its way into its esophagus, simply fell out of its slit throat and onto the table. Bryukhonenko's machine maintained what we call life in this isolated brain. And here, looking at these old, grainy frames, we encounter the central conflict that sets our entire story in motion. What exactly are we seeing? The reflexes of dying flesh? The galvanic dance of dead nerves stimulated by a mechanical pump? Or is it something more? Can this be called life? If so, what did this head feel? Did it experience fear, confusion, pain? Was it